kind of wanted to get a feel in the room, just how many people have actually tried to raise some queens on their own before?
Right.
Queen? Any luck? I mean, anybody have any luck at all or not?
I have not had luck grafting. I've had luck with notching frames after, and then putting them in queen capsules and getting, 2 or 3 queens out of one hive.
Okay. Well, I've had very good results at times, and I've had some really lousy, dismal results. It's all over the map, and so I can't tell you that I've got it figured out yet, but bottom line is, I'll show you what I've kind of been doing, and most of the time I can end up getting some queens this way. It's mostly a matter of using what you already got available to you. So, first thing is, number one is with your queens, you need to anticipate your future needs. Don't wait until you need a queen to raise a queen. I mean, we are in probably the best time frame right now. The bees are getting ready to swarm. They're getting ready to start building queen cells. I've actually got a few queen cells going from the stronger colonies. Right now, the weak ones, of course, are not doing anything at all. Some of my moderate colonies are starting to fill up. I could tell a difference looking at them today. I went in for just a little bit today, although the wind was terrible. I didn't really get to see much, but yesterday I was in there as well, and I could see that there was a big increase in the number of cell cups that are underneath there. Does everybody know what a cell cup looks like in that on the bottom board, or on the bottom of the frame, really? So there's a big increase for that. So they're getting ready. There's no doubt about it. The hives are filling up with brood, and the thing now is the temperature is just not staying stable enough, and that we're fighting that temperature just constantly. In that I think they're saying Monday night is supposed to be down in the 30s again. And so that's chilled. I've already lost a couple of splits in that from that. Well, I didn't lose the split, but lost some of the brood in the split in that. So I've set it back, done more damage than good trying to get move ahead with this. But the main thing is that I wanted you to consider, if you've got a couple of colonies, taking those couple of colonies and making a resource colony out of it, essentially have a queen around so that, if you're expecting to get honey from your 2 main colonies and that you've got another colony sitting around that you have a queen in, that you can control how much. In other words, anytime you got 2 hives, one hive is always going to be stronger than the other. That's just the way things are. And you can kind of go in there and use that nuke to generate brood frames and give that to the colony and that needs some help in that. It's always a good thing to try to get your equipment equalized as much as possible, I guess, in the spring, and that if at all possible. So hopefully that makes some sense. I guess moving on, purchasing queens and that, everybody knows, if you're going to buy a queen, you're probably looking $35, $40, up to $80, $90 now they're getting to be. If you need a single queen in a hurry, they'll ship it to you next day, but then you add the $60 on it for the shipping, and you're basically looking at a $100 bill to get a single queen. And it's just, it's cost prohibitive anymore. So just be thinking about that. If you've got buddies that live close to you or something of that nature, you may be able to get a queen from them and avoid that. Buy 2 or 3 queens at a time. That way you're spreading out that cost a little bit amongst the queens and that, and you can build your colonies up. People always say, well, if you make splits, after a while you get more colonies than what you want, and that's true, but by the same token, at the end of the year, if you look at it that way, you can basically cut the number down and join those colonies together and take really nice, strong colonies in the winter. You're going to have to get rid of 1 queen and that kind of thing. Or if you think they got a good shot at making it, take it through, because I've had really nice, strong colonies just fail miserably over the winter, and then a little nuke sitting right next to them managed to make it. And so, go figure.
So how do you do that? Just put them in a, I've never done the raised queen just for the spare queens. I mean, you know, have spare queens just for them.
Well, I mean, like,
You put them in a nook and then just give each queen their own resources and, but not very much or what?
yeah, I mean, well, I think I'll cover that a little bit
Okay.
as I go into a couple of sections, but
Okay.
remind me if I haven't gotten back to you on it.
Okay.
Okay. Again, consider purchasing queens locally and that, neighboring beekeepers and that. If you're, you know, it depends on what situation you're in. I mean, if the hive has become hopelessly queenless, basically, they have no chance of producing a queen anymore. It's been too long since their queen has been gone. You know, you may be able to just borrow a frame of eggs or something from a neighbor or something of that, you know, purchase a frame from them and get that put in your hive and that, and give your bees a second shot at being able to raise their own queen. It may not be the greatest queen, but it'll be better than nothing at all. All right. Utilizing swarm queens. A lot of us go out there, we get swarms, you know, and as the years progress and, you know, you go through and you see all kinds of strange things. Usually people see the prime swarm issue, and that has the original queen in it. Well, you can also have situations where you start generating they start generating these after swarms, they're known as, and basically I've seen as many as 5 virgin queens come out of a single colony and end up on a fence, believe it or not, and they all make just blotches, and each one of them had a virgin queen in it. And I'm over there harvesting them. I took the best ones, and I took them first, and I stuck them into 2 different nuke boxes, because that's all I had with me. And I put them and divided them up that way, and then I figured, well, if there's anything left tomorrow, you know, we'll go back in there and sort it out. But, you know, I was able to find one of the queens in there and get rid of her. But the point is that there are queens out there, and that they may be virgin queens, but it's better than, you know, losing your colonies. All right, the next thing, and I guess Tom covered this last week, so I'm not sure how much of this is going to be the same thing, but I kind of wanted to put some of it down on how I do it. And I can tell you right now, I haven't done 2 splits the same, and I've been doing this for years and years and years, and I can't tell you that I've ever done it exactly the same any 2 times. It depends on the temperatures, it depends on how strong the colonies are, where you're going to make that split. If you're making an in-yard split, it's different than if you're going to be moving it out. Typically, I have 6 yards, and I can basically move, so I've got the ability to move my bees around a lot. And I find I get a lot better results just doing that. Make up the swarm the way you want it, and don't leave it in that yard. Throw it on the back of the truck, drive 2 miles, put it in a different yard. Those bees are going to stay there now, so the way you made it up, it should be enough to keep it going. And if not, then you got to think about that a little more. All right, the bees, as I said earlier, and that the bees are beginning right now to build cell cups and that. I was in a hive yesterday. I'll bet you there were 50 cell cups I saw. In fact, I saw 8 on a single frame. There was a damaged area of comb on one of the brood combs, and they had just covered that thing with cell cups and that. They're all brand new wax, and they're building these new cell cups and that. So, you know, the point is that they're really starting to think about it.
And are all those at the bottom of your frames? Because I went in mine and it had like 3 of them in the middle.
Yeah.
Supersede yourself.
No, this frame that I told you that had 8 on it, none of those were at the bottom. They were all, like I said, in a damaged area, and that it was about 1/3 of the way over on the frame, if you will, and just scattered or whatever, and that it was just irregular, a lot of drone comb as they tried to repair the damage or whatever, and it just gave them opportunities. They like to hide those amongst the drone cells you'll see on the bottoms of frames or anywhere.
Do you think those would be swarm queens too there, up there?
I'm sorry?
Do you think those would be swarm queens too? Or you think
If they're
practice,
if they're building cells up there and there's no emergency situation going on in the colony, it's possible they can be. I don't know if I would take those. I will probably end up pulling that comb out of there is what I'm gonna end up doing. I tend, to be honest with you, most of the time, for me, I go through and I try to start going in about once a week and going through my colonies and looking for, just sit down at the back of them, pry up the back of the box and lift it up enough that you can see the bottom of those combs. And you can see those cell cups or actual cells starting to form there. As long as there's still cups, it's no big deal. Nothing's gonna happen in the next week. But if it's beyond that and you're starting to see eggs in there or tiny larvae starting to form in there with some royal jelly around them and that, then once they get those things capped, I mean,
It's done.
they can go, Usually I find that if you've had a period of rainy or cool weather and then the weather breaks, it's the day that breaks, when you get the sun pops out all of a sudden and it warms up and it's like, okay, they're gone. They'll tolerate sitting around the hive for a few days while it's raining and stuff, but.
You know what, Corey Stevens said about that, that's the hive he uses to make queen cells.
Yeah,
Take queen out
yeah,
and wrap into it.
yeah. This is what I was just talking about. Basically, I got ahead of myself here. The temperatures are cool and windy in March, and that simply raising the rear of the box up so that you can see under there. Now, just be careful when you're doing that. Try to pull that box back about an inch or so from the front edge, so that when you lift that thing up, it doesn't slip off the front and you end up trying to chase it down there. They can be heavy yet. I mean, this time of year, they're probably not too bad. But, any rate, just kind of be aware of that. That's the easiest way to find it. And I don't spend a lot of time with them. If I see that there are cells actually started, then I've got to do something more quickly. Basically, once you start finding viable cells, you can assess whether the hive is strong enough to split. And I kind of go by, if I've got at least 6 frames of bees that are fully covered, and that's always the hard thing to describe, what's fully covered, I mean, some people look at it and if there's 3 bees having a meeting on the side of a frame, they think it's a full frame, and it's not. I mean, it's got to be well covered. So, that's the main thing. So if you got 6 good frames of being covered, there's a good chance you can make a nuke from that, do a split. And I don't like to see the temperatures dropping below 50 degrees. Like I said, Monday or Tuesday, some of the splits I just did may be in danger because it's going to drop down that cold now, they're saying.
And Ken, from a clarity perspective, when you say 6 frames covered, you mean covered with bees, not covered with brood?
Right, 6 frames covered, well covered with bees.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Ken, would it help to, I mean, if you thought maybe it was gonna get cold later, a little later, if you put that like above the double screen, where they can get the heat from the down below,
Well,
I mean, I've done that to,
if you had a really strong one, maybe, but I don't know that I have enough. Usually I'm trying to stay ahead of that and keep it to a point where I'm not getting any that are that much stronger than others. But that doesn't mean that certainly anything you can do.
I mean, above the parent hive, put it up there.
Right.
I mean, you can put all empties on both sides of it or whatever.
Right.
Something to.
A lot of times what'll happen is, think about it, if you take those 6 frames and you split that into 3 and 3, and that if those 3 frames are filled up with brood, that is a problem in itself. When I make my splits, they're very rarely the same size. Okay, I basically am going to favor one or the other. I tend to want to make my new colony that is now queenless, the queenless portion of that split, I want that to stay on the original hive stand, because the bees coming back from the field and so forth and that then would only help to strengthen that one. So I'll give that 3 frames, for example, of brood, and or 3 frames of bees, and then I'll look at those frames, and if there's one good solid frame in the center, perhaps, and only a little bit on one other frame or something like that, I'll give them just 2 frames of that. Take that other one, put it back in the queen right part of the colony. Now go over to that queen right part of the colony and grab some of those frames and shake some of those bees from it back into that weaker one to help boost that. So I'm putting more bees in that weaker colony and they're not trying to keep so much brood. Also, just selecting certain frames. The ones that get you are the ones where they built the queen's laid all the way out to the edges of the frames or whatever, and they go around there, and that outer band, as the temperatures can get cold, the bees contract, and all that outer stuff just freezes or gets chilled and dies. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard from an old beekeeper once that had a lot of colonies, 400 to be exact. He told me that bees actually can chill at 80 degrees. The brood can chill at 80 degrees. I mean, they're supposed to be keeping that brood nest about 93 to 95 degrees. And if it stays at 80 degrees for too long, that will kill that brood. So, on a 30-degree night, that's hard to do.
And you made your split, what way split?
I do all kinds of splits. I mean, I first go through mine, and I try to go through them early enough before they're ready to go into swarm mode, so that the queens are still laying well. Because once they get ready to swarm, about 4 or 5 days maybe before they get ready to swarm, they tend to reduce the feed that the queen is getting and so forth, and they want to get the old gal to be able to fly again. She's got to go with the swarm, and she hasn't flown for a while, so they're going to cut it down, and so it becomes very difficult. Sometimes making the splits at all at that point can be difficult because you can't find any eggs in there in the colony. But usually, if that's the case and that's the only restriction, I'll go to another hive somewhere from another queen that isn't ready, and I'll pull out a frame of eggs and give it that at least, so that I know they have the ability
So
to
you're
make.
counting on the hives that you're leaving behind, and you're taking away the queen right, and you're counting on them to build their own queen, is what you're saying, right?
Right. That's one thing. I mean, that's all you can do at this time of year. I mean, I've had my order in since first part of January with queen breeders out in California, and bottom line is I've got one shipment supposed to arrive on the 17th of April, and I think the other one's supposed to come in on the 21st.
There's a queen breeder in this area. It's called Brick House Bees. It's let's see, I'll look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, a lot of it depends on what you're after as well, and
that's true, yeah.
we'll go through that, but I mean, everybody's got different opinions, and you're fine with whatever you want to work with in that.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, so did I make the splitting part of it understandable? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody kind of got a feel for that? Okay. I'll move on. All right. Basically, a couple of days after I made my split, I want to go back into those colonies and check on them, make sure that those queen cells in there are capped now and being cared for by the queenless portion of that colony and that. In other words, I've gone in there and I looked at those brood frames, and I specifically picked out brood combs that had the cells that were being built already. They were well under construction for swarming. You also know by using those swarm queens and that they've been fed the royal jelly diet from the very beginning, if you will, and so you've got the best shot at getting a good queen that way. When you're making splits, if you come across a colony that is really strong, you may be able to make not only one extra colony, an extra split from it, you can get a second one, and I had one colony once, I actually got a third one out of it, but every year is not the same, and every colony is not the same, so you just have to judge that, but you're going to just try to I tend to want to make the splits that are starting out smaller to begin with, see if they take it, check them for a couple of days, and then come back, if they made it, and they're not chilled, they got through the cold night or whatever, and they're actually building that cell and everything is looking like it's progressing good, then I can go in there and I can put in some additional brood. But again, yeah, it's all gonna depend on temperature and that. Don't go looking for that great big frame, because when you get greedy and you think you're gonna get all those bees hatching out, you're probably gonna chill it all and lose it. So I look for the little ones and say, I'll take 500, and if those 500 work, then I'll give them another one a few days later, that type of thing, and build it up that way. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if that I really have anything that addresses that on here, but is that a lot of times this time of year, you're gonna find you've got colonies and that are, they just barely made it through the winter. They're awful weak. And it just seems like nothing you do is getting them to a point where they're growing at all. One thing you can try, and I've had some success with it, I'm not gonna tell you it works every time, but is that if I have a really weak colony, and in the same yard I've got a nice, good, a really good, strong colony with lots of bees, they can afford to lose some bees. I'll go over and first thing I'll do is I'll go into that colony and look at in that weak colony, and I'll find that queen. I'll stick her in a queen cage, and I'll put her in the center of the two frames that she's got. I mean, right in the center of wherever they're at, and close that up, and then basically, then I'll go over to a good strong colony, and I'll take about 3 or 4 frames of bees there, make sure the queen is not on any of those frames, and shake those bees off of there. Typically, if you go for frames that have open brood on it, they will tend to have more nurse bees on them, because that's what the nurse bees are doing. They're there feeding that open brood. Big frames of sealed brood don't need any food, so they're already pre-provisioned, I guess. So that won't do you any good. But by doing that, you're going to get a higher percentage of younger nurse bees. Dump those into that colony, and that they don't know how to get back to their original hive, so they're more likely to stay there. And that'll increase the population, and then after 2 days, usually any fighting that was going on in there has calmed down, things are getting back to normal, they're used to her pheromones. At that point, usually you can just let her out, and now you've got that queen, hopefully with enough that she can start at least laying some eggs of her own in that.
Are you shaking those in a box? Is that what you do?
Shaking
You get the
them,
nursery bees, shaking them off in a box?
I'm shaking them into
You shake it right into the hive.
I'm shaking them into that weak colony.
And then the other ones that fly out and the nursing bees will stay in there, correct?
Right.
That's what you're doing. Okay.
Right. Bees don't fly out of the hive until they're 3 weeks of age. So the first 3 weeks they spend inside a colony. So they have no idea. Whatever box you put them in, that's where they're going to stay. And but once they've been out and they learn where they're at in the world, then it's real tough doing it in the yard. So if that's the case, you can add stuff. But most of them go back into the original hive before you get the lid back on it. So then I guess the next thing is when you're trying to raise some of your own queens and that, I hear an awful lot of complaints about beekeepers that have spicy or nasty bees and that. I got this hive last year and it worked just great. They were fine. I had no problems at all. And now this year, them things are chasing me down the yard. I can't, and they're just terrible. And so, that's probably about my only real selection criteria at this point. As you add things, it becomes increasingly more complicated and difficult to get what you're after. You got to be careful when you buy that great queen from somebody and put that in your operation. If you don't know how they are, and now you manage to raise a bunch of daughter queens from that or something, and you basically can be bringing in a real headache that you didn't really want to have happen. All right, some of the other things that people do breed bees for and that are disease resistance, hygienic behavior, overwintering behavior, and honey production. You know, some bees, like the Italian bees and that tend to just go full boat, you know, they wanna go, you know, no hold barred. They're gonna basically just get in there and lay like crazy and try to build up those colonies as big as possible and just go and go and go. And then you got others, the carniolans, I think are supposed to be more of a, you know, let's think this through a little bit further and basically slow down, a little more conservative, that's the word.
Yeah.
That's the word, yeah. Conservative, that basically back off a little bit. And I think a lot of it depends on what you've got right around you in your local area and what makes sense for you. You know, I used to know a guy over in Missouri that had about 200 colonies of Russian bees. And basically, he said even with that, he felt that, you know, it was really difficult to keep those Russian traits in his bees because that many colonies that are in a lot of different yards are scattered over there, and they're all surrounded by native bees and Italian bees, and, you know, just, it's just real tough to keep that going. And I know myself, when I first set up a yard south of Columbia, the bees there, anything I tried to mate up there, any virgin queens that hatched out in the spring, I could bet, you know, 6 weeks later that hive was going to be meaner than all get out. You just couldn't stand to be around them. And it took a while, and I actually talked to, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Harris or not, Jeff Harris. He's one of the researchers that helped develop the VSH trait in bees. And he basically said, if you can get it done in 6 weeks or 6 years, you know, of constantly working at it, you'll be doing good. In other words, to get the actual genetics in an area to kind of change. Because year after year, if you keep at it and you're consistent with it, you're going to be, even when your hives swarm, they're going to end up eventually out in the trees, replacing hives that died out in those trees. And now your area, you're going to carve out a little area around your bee yard, and they'll get better. And I've gotten to a point where I don't have to take them all out of that area anymore. But I have like 3 hives to the north of Waterloo, and I have 3 to the south. And for the first probably 7-8 years at least, I just couldn't mate anything up to the north and that. I'd go up there and I'd pull them out. I'd pull that queen, that virgin queen out of there as soon as I could, and I'd get her back down to the south, let her mate there, and then after she was mated and laying good, then I'd take her back up there. It's a lot of extra moving, but that's the only way to, you know, to get it under control. Basically, we're talking again a little more about queen selection criteria, in that whenever the bees you're buying are basically known as production queens, in that you're hopefully buying them from someone that has a breeder queen that was artificially inseminated. Otherwise, it's basically a pig in a poke. You don't know what you're getting. And even the ones that are selling the stuff that's supposed to be VSH and all that kind of stuff, for the most part, they're doing the same thing. They're buying it from some other beekeeper that says that it's supposed to be VSH. Now, if you've ever looked at that trait and seen that trait actually expressed in a colony, you'll see that you'll get a lot of what they call baldies and so forth in the hive and that, and resealing of the cells and that. It looks like somebody took a can opener and opened up the top of the cells, and then they basically didn't completely cover it, so you can see the top of the little pupa in there at that point. And if you see a lot of that in there, that's actually a good trait. I mean, it means that VSH trait is strong in those bees. But that's something that's tough, and I was talking with Corey Stevens about it at one point, and he said something about, I guess he said that John Harbaugh and Jeff Harris and Dr. Hutengardner, when they developed the VSH trait and all that, they came up, they call it the Harbaugh assay. I think he's actually, Corey's put something on YouTube now about that. And it basically tells you how to go about doing that. And that's a lot tougher than it sounds like, to do that. You know, your treatments, for example, that we're doing to all save our bees have to go by the wayside, because if you continue treating your bees, then you don't know, you're not getting the advantage of you're not learning. In other words, the technique for creating the VSH is not all that difficult to do. It's having the willpower to stick with it and see it out. And Corey says he's got, what did he say, 7 to 8 years he's been doing it, and basically he's gotten to a point where he's only seeing a 25% loss on average per year over the winter as a result of how many bees he ended up losing. That VSH trait is carried. He's not doing any treatment for those bees. So if he's getting that's not bad. I'd kind of like to know from this room while we're sitting here, what kind of losses percentage-wise are we talking about in the group? I mean, there's been a lot of, who was it, the PAM group or whatever, put out a thing on the internet recently, I think in February, about across the U.S., they said we've lost 62% of our colonies in the past year. Did anybody else see that or hear that?
I lost 50%.
Yeah, that's pretty drastic,
Yeah.
And,
Hurts. Does hurt.
I'm doing good. I got 100% for the last couple, 3 years, treatment free.
Okay, what are you doing?
Essential oils.
What's that?
I'm using essential oils.
Uh-huh.
How many hives?
Well, I got 4 right now.
4 hives.
I went in the window with 4 and came out with 4. I've had many more, but I've sold some.
That's good.
Well, I myself, this year, I went into winter with about 44 or 46, can't remember exactly which, but right in there, and basically, I ended up with 38 at the end of it when it was all said and done, and most of those losses were actually in a yard at my house. I had to go in for surgery last September, and I had treated all my out yards prior to going in for that surgery, so they got the treatment in time. When I got back from the surgery, I wasn't as quick to get on my feet as I thought I was going to be, and so it took a while, and it was too late when I did it. I did the same treatment, but it just wasn't effective. The bees didn't have a chance to build up any winter bees after that, and so I took a real hit. I lost about 60, I had 4 left out of 12. Yeah, so what's that, 66% or whatever I lost in my home yard, and that is a result of it, so. Basically, we've already discussed this. This is about with the queen and that. By the way, I'm going to make this, I've already sent a copy of this to Mark, so he'll be able to distribute that as he sees fit. This is a little bit on some of the different methods that you can get. And like I said, you don't all have to be good at this stuff. I mean, I know myself, I started grafting the first time, I guess, about 2006 or 7, something like that. And I took 2 or 3 different classes. There's a group called the Heartland Apicultural Society. I don't know how many of you have heard of that or been to their conferences, but they're definitely good. They bring in some good people there, and almost without fail, they will try to have a queen rearing course as part of that. It doesn't cost you anything. You just have to get there early and sign up early in order to get on the list, because they'll only usually allow, I think 25 is the most they'll let in any one of those classes. Otherwise, it gets so big, nobody gets anything out of it. But that's probably the best way to learn how to do queen grafting. And with grafting, what we're talking about is going in there with a small tool and picking up that larva of the proper age, and that requires good eyesight, which I don't have. My grafting was a lot better 10 years ago than what it is today, I can tell you that. I make a lot of pureed larvae when I go down in there now. They don't work out.
You stick them back in your mouth?
I have, the tool, I have, yeah.
I heard the other day that a lot of queen.
But I don't like grilled jelly, it don't taste very good.
Yeah. They said, you know, they're always putting that tool in their mouth to keep it soft, and so they eat a lot of brood.
Right, yeah. So, at any rate, grafting is one method in that, and I probably have done more grafting the last 5 or 6 years than I have any other time, and I still have problems with it in that, you know, getting that right. Number one is temperature is an issue, and, you know, it wants to dry out, so you gotta have a towel over it and all that kind of thing. You gotta get the light just right. That's always my hardest, is getting the light. I mean, even if I've got a big old flashlight in that, I just can't quite manage that. I've actually had some of my best success grafting, believe it or not, in the front seat of my pickup truck. I go in there and shake all the bees off and sit there on the steering wheel and graft off the steering wheel, and that's actually worked better. It keeps the wind off of them. It's usually warmer in there and everything, and then I just go over and drop it back in the hive, and that's actually worked pretty well. This is probably the system that I like the best as far as me feeling that I get my best queens from them. And they're basically queen excluder grid systems, and there's different companies that make them. Basically what I'm finding is the original was called the NICOT system, and I think it was developed in France, if I'm not mistaken. And it actually works pretty well. You have this plastic grid, they call it, and you have on that grid 110 holes that are molded in these little, well, in a pattern that's going to simulate where cells would be. So and on the back side of this thing, you put these little plastic cell cups, and you put the queen in there, and basically, in theory, she's supposed to start laying eggs in those cell cups there for you within 24 hours. In practice, I've rarely seen it happen within 24 hours. It has, but queens seem to either love that system or hate it. I mean, either you put a queen in there and she'll go right to work on it, or she will sit in there. I had a queen in one time. I had in there for 8 days, and she never laid a single egg in there. And I finally said, well, I don't know what it is. Picked her out, put her back in that original colony, and let her out to lay. And within 2 days, I was seeing eggs back in that hive again. So, you know, she just didn't want to lay in those plastic cell cups. But the advantage that you have with using that type of a system is that you can more precisely determine the age of the larva that you're using, because essentially you're doing the same thing as grafting. You're basically you're having the queen, you're confining the queen in a small area so that she has to lay eggs in those cups for you. And then you go in there, and for me, what I look for is she'll lay the egg in there, and basically it's going to take 3 days for that egg to hatch. When it hatches, the bees are going to start feeding it. The first 12 hours or so, they're going to feed it what I think is essentially worker jelly. They're basically, it's a clear, when you look at it, it is clear in the bottom of the cell. After it's been in there for 12 to 18 hours, somewhere in there, you start getting into the area where that's when you really want them to be getting the high-octane royal jelly, if you will. And you can see it. You'll actually see in the little pool of jelly that's in there that some of it is rather clear, and the rest of it will be very milky. It's looking like cottage cheese type stuff. It's not lumpy, but it's basically a sour cream. Okay, it's becoming white and opaque, if you will, and not transparent like it was. And when I start seeing that they've gone from that to that, that's the time you want to take that. Now you stick that in your cell bar upside down, put it in a queenless colony, and basically they should go ahead and start continuing to feed that, and that seems to be about the best time. But But by doing that, you know exactly how old that is. Because most people, when they're grafting out there, they tend to take them and they're way too big already. That thing is already well into its development as a worker before it ever gets its first taste of royal jelly. And so as a result, you know, there's about, I think, a 4-day window or whatever in there about that they can make a queen out of it. And by the time you get to day 5, I think it switches over to what they call an intercast. And if you've ever seen one of those, I think I've seen two of those in my lifetime. They're really bizarre looking bees. They look something, I mean, it's not a worker, it's not a queen, it's just not right. And if it does lay any eggs, it will generally be, you know, it'll turn into drones or whatever, because they're not, she's just not right. Basically, this is just describing all of the information I just talked about with the color of that liquid at the time, and so you're picking those up. You can actually take those out of there over a period of several days and put them on your cell bar, but if you do, you need to put a piece of tape down the length of your cell bar and mark which ones are which, so you know what age they are. Because it becomes important later on as that cell is developing and they're getting ready to hatch, that you're hitting the timing on that pretty close, because you have to protect it, especially if you're going to leave them in there the full length of time. In other words, you know, they always like to show you these cell bars and they pull them up and they got 40 nice queen cells or whatever on there and all that. But if you miss that, or you miss in the hive the fact that they had started a queen cell prior to you doing all of this on their own, that one may come out beforehand. And I had it happen to me on a couple occasions where I did catch a queen that they had done on their own. She emerged first, came in there and killed all 40 cells, and I basically had nothing.
Do you think it ever happens, Ken, where a virgin queen from somewhere else could have come in there and maybe killed a bunch? You know what I'm saying? From another, I mean, maybe a virgin went out to mate and come back.
And went back.
Or didn't go out to mate, but anyway, she went in there.
You know, I would say in the world of beekeeping, almost anything's possible.
I mean, I've heard that.
I would say the odds are probably a lot better that I messed up somewhere. I missed some queen cell somewhere, or I miscalculated on the timing of it and that. You know, when bees are making a queen, they don't wait. They don't care about our rules about trying to catch it at the very earliest. They want a queen and they want it now. And so they're going to take a little bit larger larva and start feeding that, which means that it's further along when they start it, which means it's not going to take as long until you get to that 16-day point. So I've had a lot of times, if you go in there and you think you're going to wait for the full 16 days, it ain't going to happen. You'll go in there, and I've had them as early as 12 days already, because that larva in there somewhere along the line was too far along in its development, and so it only took 12 days until they were able to have a virgin queen emerge. And
Do you use an incubator at all?
An incubator?
Yeah.
For what? I don't, but I mean,
I just, at a point, you can pull them, that's what we do, is I'll pull them out at a point, and probably on day 12 or 13, I'll put them in the incubator, let them hatch out in cups in there, then I don't have a chance of, like you say, an older queen hatching first and then going around and killing them all.
yeah, again, it's one of those things. I did take a
And you've got kind of a leap, you know, like this weekend, I thought I was gonna graft this weekend, but of course Mother Nature changed that. But if you had cells in a hive and you were worried about them hatching before you could get them in a nook, if they're in an incubator and they hatch on their own, and then it's not too big a deal.
Can you put those protectors on the end so if the queen did hatch, I mean, she stay in there?
Yeah, that's just it. There's, at the end of this, there's actually a picture, and I'll show you what this system uses and that. I know I've seen those protectors and that's the JZBC you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, I've never used that, so I don't really know,
Okay.
too much about it, but, I like the NICOT, so.
Mhm.
At any rate, you know, it's just, I'm convinced after doing it, my grafting versus doing it in the NICOT, I'm more likely to get a better queen in that if I use it out of the NICOT system. All right, and then don't forget, you know, harvesting natural queen cells. These bees are right now getting ready to start swarming. If you start seeing those cells in there, you know, the problem is usually that they'll pick a certain frame and they'll put 6 cells on that one frame, and you can't get multiples out of it. It's like, it'd be real nice if you could get them to put 2 on each frame, unfortunately. Then you can make you 3 or 4 splits out of that. But just consider that you can do it. And usually, for me, I like to use 2 queen cells in every nuke that I'm gonna try and start like that. And then I go out there the day I think they're going to emerge, or even a day or 2 earlier, and I'll start checking them. And if they haven't come out yet, I'll go back the next day right away and I'll check it again. And if one of them's out, sometimes they haven't had time to get to that second cell. And so if it's still available, then if I can find that virgin queen in there, I'll leave her in that hive, pull that frame completely out of there and give it to yet another split. And basically that queen will emerge in that one. And that way I don't waste the queens. I mean, I've even seen, especially if you have native or spicy bees, they tend to raise a lot more queen cells. If you're using the bees that have been genetically bred by somebody, they might produce anywhere from 2 or 3 to 20 queen cells possibly in the season as they're getting ready to swarm. And you go into a native colony of the bees and that, just out of the trees and that somewhere in the middle of nowhere, those things, they will produce twice that at least, 40, 50. I wouldn't even be surprised by 60 queen cells in a single colony sometimes. They just go absolutely nuts. And they build beautiful cells. They'll, you know, they're determined to survive, and they will. Another thing that you want to think about, you know, in controlling the behavior of the bees in your yards and that, is saturating your yards and that, if you can, with good drones and that. In the springtime, the bees are predisposed, they're trying to swarm, so they know they need drones, so they're going to be building lots of drone cells. I go in any hives that I've got that they chase me out of there once, I mean, they got a mark against them. I don't want to deal with that. I basically will go back in there and I'll cut as much of that drone comb out as I can, along the bottoms or whatever, and get rid of that. Number one is I feel like it's only helping me because I'm harvesting mites while I'm doing that. I'm cutting, you know, those sealed cells that you're getting out of there have got a tendency to attract the mites, so you're getting that out of your hive. If you know, the first thing I usually do is look at the bottoms of those combs, the natural cells, and tear open a bunch of those and try to get a feel. If I'm seeing a couple of mites in there on a single frame, you got a fairly decent mite population already. But if I can go in there and I can open up 2 or 3 frames and I only see 1 or maybe a second mite or something, it's pretty low. At that point, I feel the mite count is low enough that I can go ahead and risk that, and I can go ahead and put one of those green drone frames in there, let them raise a whole frame of that. Now there are 2,000 drones per side, so 4,000 drones total on one of those frames. So if you get that queen to fill that up for you, and that's coming out of one of your better, more gentle colonies and so forth, you're going to get those genetics. You're going to flood the area with lots and lots of those drones. And at the same time, you're cutting back the drones from the mean, nasty ones that you don't want mating with your virgin queens anyway. So that's what that's all about. Ideally, they say you want to have them at the compass points. If you can, if you're really big, doing this a lot, You know, you can have multiple yards, maybe 2 miles away, 3 miles away from your apiary where you're breeding your queens. To pick up drones in those areas and that, but, you know, I've got 2 yards, one east and one west of my main operation. One's about a mile to the east of me, and the other one's about 2 miles, a little better than 2 miles, I guess, to the west of me. And I try to keep a lot of drones in there, throw some of those green drone frames in there. What you don't want to do is, if you haven't checked your mite count, or you don't have a pretty good feel for what the mites are like in your hive, is throw one of those in there and let them hatch out 4,000 drones and all the mites that go with it, and now you've got a big old varroa bomb you just generated in your backyard. So just be aware of that. All right. Kind of going back over this a little bit, conclusions: anticipate your losses and try to get yourself some nukes or a resource colony to set up, even though you know you don't want that. You can always harvest brood out of that and use that to build your big ones, your actual production hives and that. Don't tolerate defensive spicy bees unless that's just what you like working with. They're hard. They are hard to beat. I mean, they will survive when these mated things or whatever that we buy won't. I mean, don't dismiss them, but they're not for new. In my mind, they're not for new beginners. That's for more seasoned beekeepers that are familiar with getting stung on a regular basis, can tolerate it, and you just go on and do your business. So. That's you know, it's up to the individual. Utilize your swarms and that, any queens and that you've got there. Try to keep those green drone frames in there. Saturate your yards using those good drones. Get rid of the bad ones. If you've got a hot hive, don't tolerate it in there. I don't care how you say, well, that's my strongest hive, but it's also meaner than heck. And when it gets stronger, it's only going to be worse. So, you know, why would you put up with that? Try to do something about it ahead of time. And, you know, that resource colony may be just the ticket. You know, pull that queen out of there, get rid of that mean, nasty queen, put a new one in there. And if you've got good drones for her to mate, for her to have mated with, basically you should have good luck. There's a lot of other queen methods in that, the Miller queen method, the cloak board method, the cell punch method. I think there's, what they call that one where you mentioned it earlier, Mark, you fold the combs down. Notching, and all those things. They're all methods. You try and use them and see what you like the best. This is the actual NICOT system, and I want to bring that up. And I'm not selling NICOT systems, but I can tell you how you can tell the difference between the true thing that works well and the cheap Chinese knockoffs that are being sold even by some of our bee supply houses now. And it is the price. That thing, that little grid there on the left next to the cell bar frame, that grid is basically the heart of that NICOT system. You can see there are 11 rows of 10 or 110 total cells. You put the cell cups, that are those little brown cell cups on the back of those, and then you put the queen on the front, and there's a little plate that goes over the front of that, which is actually a queen excluder. And that keeps her in the little device, and the bees are able to go in and out and take care of the bees and all the brood and that, and the queen inside there. And that system, I just ordered one tonight because the first one I had I lost in the fire, and I've been buying these cheap Chinese knockoffs. You can buy one of those for $20. The cheap Chinese ones. This one cost me $90, and with the shipping and tax and everything, it was $110 to get that. But I just decided I'd get it. I've got a Chinese one in right now. I'm trying it, and what happens is the cell cups don't fit their own device. Their cell cups don't fit on their own one. When you try to push the cell cup on the back of a little post that the queen lays the egg in, the cell cup won't go all the way down on there because it's too close to the next cell cup to it. It looks to me like the difference is, I think the NICOT, they probably go through an extra step in the manufacturing where they're polishing those or something on the outside, which is grinding. Because if you feel the outside of the cheap knockoffs, it's like sharp on there. There's like an edge. that plastic has kind of,
They haven't deburred
they
it.
haven't deburred them,
Right,
essentially.
right.
That's exactly what it is, I think. So, you know, will they work? That's why I'm trying it right now. I wanted to see if it would work. I put a queen in there, and she did lay eggs in it. I've got about 15 or 20 eggs in it right now. What day, we did that Tuesday, I think, or whatever, and there were eggs in there today. So tomorrow and the next day, I'll be watching real close when they're actually ready. I've got a queenless hive that I can take those from and put them in.
So can we do that, I'm sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
when you have a queenless hive, let's just say you had 20 eggs, you putting all 20 eggs in that queenless hive and allowing them to draw it out? Is that
Well,
what you're doing?
if I have a good, strong cell builder, and that's another thing that you
So
would
you're
learn
doing-
if you went for an actual queen rearing course and that, when you make a cell builder and that, you can build a cell builder. You don't have to find one naturally. Now, if you got a really good, strong colony, it takes about 200 nurse bees to provide enough royal jelly to feed one queen. So there are producers in California that are right now producing queens at a rate of 130 queens in a single colony. Okay, so that means you want to multiply, what is that, 26,000 nurse bees they have to have in order to feed that adequately. And so I've raised really good queens in a 10-frame nuke box or in a 5-frame nuke box already, you know, but you have to go in there and you have to shake in. So how do you do that? Well, you take your nuke box and you make that hive queenless. You're going to go into 2, 3, 4 colonies, whatever it takes, and you're going to find frames that are open brood, and you know that the bees that are on there are probably bees that are there for a reason. They're nurse bees, and they're feeding that young larva. And so you grab those frames out of there, look it over real good, make sure that the queen isn't on there, and then take that frame and stick that in your box. And then when you get 5 of them in there, you fill that in there and that, go back and get some more and just dump a bunch more bees in there and just load that thing up. The ones that don't want to stay are going to go back, but get that thing as strong as you can and then go back in there and then do your graft and, you know, be realistic with it and that. A good, strong colony, I think, can make you about 40 cells just fine. They say that they run 3 deeps out there in California to do those where they're doing 130 at a time. And, you know.
So this NICOT system,
Yeah.
do you pull the cups off and you put them inside the cell builder? Or do you put the whole NICOT grid in?
I put the NICOT grid in the hive that I want to propagate those genetics.
Your cell builder?
Well, no, that doesn't have to be the same. Okay, you can have a queen, like, let's say hive number 1 is your best hive.
I got you.
Okay, you can go in there and put your queen in that colony. It's her eggs, her genetics you're capturing.
Right.
Okay, but you've got hive number 6 over here, happens to be a hive that I want to make my cell builder. I've created it ahead of time. I've gone in there about the day that you're doing all this, be setting that up and making that a queenless colony and that, and then basically the day that you're getting ready to do it, go in there and cut out any cells that they might have started on their own. You don't want any competition. You want only your cells in there. And now you go back in, and when you harvest them, you literally pull the back off of there, you let the queen back down into her hive, in hive number 1, okay, and you basically take a pair of needle nose, because my fingers, I can't get them on those little cell cups. I'll take a needle nose pliers, pick that up, make sure that I see that I've got that mixture and color of the royal jelly and the worker jelly, and that they're feeding it well, and then I'll take that, stick it in a cell bar, and when I get 10 of them in there, and I put that cell bar in there, so I've got like 4
What you got
frames
right there.
of, yeah, right.
Yeah,
You
gotcha.
got that in the middle, and you got 4 frames of nurse bees, essentially.
And about day 4, day 5?
Pardon me?
Day 4, day 5, you put them on the cell bar?
Yeah, about day 4 generally. Like I said, it's just going to depend on how that queen lays in there. Some queens just refuse to lay in it. Other queens I can put in there and they'll do just fine. And you just have to try.
Now, what you do about it, Ken, can you just, take that NICOT and then do it again? I mean, load it up put the cells right in the back, or do you have to do something special to it?
You
I mean,
can do back-to-back where you basically harvest one group or whatever and do another one, but if you do, I usually will try and find some more to add to it, or some fresh young ones and
Well,
stuff.
whether you do it right or not, right away or not, but I mean, is there a preparation for the next batch? You know, to the NICOT system?
No, not really preparation. I mean, there might be just a little fighting when you first put them together, but it's not going to be anything substantial. You're not gonna find big piles of dead bees in front of your hive. You might find a few of them laying on the bottom board that didn't make it through the ordeal.
I mean, the NICOT grids, you know, the plastic part.
Yeah.
When you get you get a batch done. So now you're gonna do it again, maybe a few days later. Do you have to do anything special for that grid? Just reload it again like you did the first time? Or do you have to
Well,
clean
it
up?
depends on how the queen's laying in there and how many you harvested and all that. The thing is, I don't need 110 at a
No,
time.
right, yeah.
But you still gotta have all 110 of those
Oh,
cups
you do?
on there, yes. You
Oh.
can't just put 2 or 3 on there, because I only need 2 or 3 queens.
Oh.
You gotta fill up the entire back of the thing.
Okay,
And they'll tell you, and I'm not sure I agree with this, but they will tell you, you have to put all brand new cups on there every time. But
Oh, man.
they're also in the business of selling cups
Yeah.
and stuff.
Right.
So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. I've actually had some I felt did better if I just left the cups on there on the outside, and then I go in right in the middle and I'll put new ones right in the very center.
Oh,
And I think if there's too much there, it's got the new car smell, you know, you can smell that
Yeah.
plasticky new car
Yeah,
smell.
yeah.
And I think the queen objects to that some and just won't lay as a result.
Yeah.
But if it's been in another hive and bees have been working on it and there's little bits of wax and propolis and everything else, bee tracks and dirt, I mean, they're just, oh, this is home and we can
Yeah.
go ahead, and she tends to lay in there better, I think. So you do whatever you want, but,
you have to put it in the hive ahead of time, let the bees polish up all the.
yeah, it's best that you do it. Actually, you wanna make your NICOT up ahead of time. You're gonna take that NICOT system, and here's another tip I've learned, is that mount that in a medium frame. If you mount it in a medium frame, you're no longer limited. You can make queens in either a deep frame or in a medium frame. If you, basically, if you put it in a deep frame, then you're limited. The frame's too big, you can't put it in your medium when you get the lid back on.
Yeah.
So, I'm doing them in my medium and that, and all you do is take a piece of your foundation, and you're using, assuming you can naturally allow them to draw it down. If you wanna put a little strip of wax up there and let them make their own comb, you can do that. But I use plastic foundation now, and so I just take that frame and I basically take the NICOT system, sit it down on there, take a magic marker and put a stripe down both sides, take a knife, cut it twice once on each side, you know, and snap it off and pull out that center section, pop the 2 ends in there, put it in the middle, and there's just 2 little screws that go up from the top there, into the bottom of the bar, top bar.
Yep.
Okay, and that's what holds it in place.
Okay.
And then you put that in the hive a couple of days ahead of time, and the bees, and feed them good, and they'll basically start drawing that out right away. Another thing you're gonna learn when you're raising if you're gonna use a cell bar, whether you're grafting or anything else, is that it helps if you put a frame of pollen on one side. Think about it, the nurse bees are all there, they need to get that nourishment in order to keep feeding those queens. And so you want a frame of pollen there, I mean, some honey and that's fine on it, but you wanna make sure there's plenty of pollen there on that side. On the other side of that, I like to drop in a frame of foundation. And the reason for that is the bees will have a tendency, when they start making their combs, they will they'll draw down the cell combs, and when they get them just about to the point that they're ready to cap them and that, now they're bored, and they basically start putting webbing in between them and building them all together, so now you gotta sit there with a pocket knife and saw them apart. But if you give them a frame of foundation right next to that, a lot of those bees that are unemployed will now go over to that frame and they'll find work over there, and they'll start working on drawing some of that foundation out rather than building so much in between the cells. And then the last tip, and probably the most important tip to me, is don't wait too long with taking them out of there. They do make a plastic curler light that you can slip up over those little, they're called yellow cell holders there that basically are what the cell cup is fitting in the cell bar. You can put all of those in there and protect all of those cells so the first one out doesn't kill all the others. But I just find if they once cap them, I'm over there making up nuke boxes, empty, nukes that are queenless as fast as I can. And then I grab 2 out of that, put that in the nuke, go to the next one, take 2 more and put that in the next one, take 2 more and put that in the next one. And by doing that, you're getting the best use of them. If one does get out earlier, it's only going to kill 1 queen, and you're not losing the whole shebang at one time. If you wait the whole time and you were off at all on how old you thought those eggs were, whenever you flipped them upside down on that, then you're gonna pay the price, and that's heartbreaking when you see a whole thing full. Ask me how I know.
Tim, one other thing I would do is feed these bees.
Oh, yes.
You need to feed them. Gourd bees is what's gonna help draw them cells out.
Right.
That pollen, like Ken says, is very important on one side, and then make sure you have some liquid feed on them somewhere.
Gourd
Yes.
bees or happy bees?
Gourd bees and happy bees.
And don't wait until the last day to start doing that. You want to be feeding them so they know they've got a steady supply of food coming in.
Yeah.
I
Even
like
if
to do
we're in
it
a
5
flow,
days,
they'll
5
still
days
come.
ahead at least. Start feeding them good if you can, and that'll improve your take a lot on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had takes where I got literally like 38 out of 40, which was really good. And I turned right around and done the same thing I thought, and I got 2 out of 40, And it's like, some of
It's
the,
still neat to get to. I mean, if
Right,
you
it's-
first do it,
right,
it's
That's right.
a
It
neat
is.
process.
yeah. I mean, for most people, if you did 10 at a time, that would be more than you would ever need.
Ken, who'd you order your NICOT through?
Mine come from Man Lake, and I only ordered from them again, this replacement, because I know that everything I have is from them, so I know it should be compatible. Better Bee, I believe, also sells a true NICOT. It's a little bit cheaper from Better Bee. The point is, if you start with that, I think it'll be all right, but I haven't confirmed that, so I don't want to know. And then you've got, I ordered recently one from Laps or whatever up in, I think, Lappies, is that how it's pronounced? Okay. At any rate, I ordered one of those. Well, it turned out that wasn't a clearance price, that was a cheap Chinese knockoff price. And here's how you tell the difference. If you look at what they call the yellow cell cup, which is the part, you've got the brown piece that fits up, there are 4 nails that go into each one of those that attach it to the underside of the bar, and then you've got the yellow cell cup that snaps onto that piece, and then your brown cell cup goes in the bottom of it. Well, that yellow piece there, if it's bright yellow, it's the cheap Chinese knockoff, and nothing fits. It don't even fit its own system. Okay, but if it's a beige color, that's the NICOT system. And from the picture I saw on Better Bee, I think that looks beige to me. So I'm basing it on that. I'm saying I think they charge $80 for theirs too, not 20.
Ken, you're gonna have to deburr all them.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's something I got to thinking about that this morning, actually. What if I were to go back and try and use the cell cups out of the NICOT, which are bird, put them in the Chinese? If they fit, then it might be not such a bad deal. But if they don't fit, if they won't go down on their flat, that back panel that goes down over those cell cups, it should be nice and flat and snap on there good. And mine isn't like that. It's high in one, high in another, because they won't go down together. They're too close together. And
Could be whoever made that grid up just got them off just a stove or two, just
Alright,
But like you said, if you try the others yourself on it, you'll know.
I'll know if that's it, but
That's the problem.
I suspect if you go with one or the other, it will work. I was actually impressed the fact that I saw 15 or 20 eggs in there this morning when I went in that hive. We just did that, and they at least are laying in it, so do what you want. And that concludes it. Any questions? Thank you. I hope that gives you some idea where to start.
There you go.